Hi, everybody.
Hello, I'm Ryan.
I'm Bethany.
And we are Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews.
And today we'll be talking about In the Palm of Your Hand. This is designed by Timothy DeCroy, and it is published by Hatchet Board Games US.
This is a dexterity style game, but it all takes place in the palm of your hands. What's happening is there is a grandfather. He can't see so well. The character playing the grandfather is going to have their eyes closed. There's also a granddaughter, and she's trying to act out some memories from his photo album for him. And so she's going to be placing items on the palm of his hand, trying to get him to recollect various memories from his past. It's a dexterity game. You're literally putting items in someone's palm, trying to get them to guess a card. It's kind of either a cooperative thing or a team-based thing based on how many players you have. Let me show you how to play. All right, here is the setup for In the Palm of Your Hand. We've got our giant deck of cards here. These are basically all the different memories from the grandfather's life that we're going to try to mime out. We've got our victory point tokens that we're going to reward once we get one of our mimes correct. And then we just have a whole bunch of miscellaneous components here. Just a whole bunch of different random little things that we'll be using to tell our stories. They are in orange and blue colors. That doesn't come into play quite yet, but later on I'll kind of show you how that works. We're going to divide up into teams. There is a way to play it with 2 players, which is kind of full cooperative. There's a way to play it with 3 players as well. But then after that, you're going to kind of divide up into teams of 2 or 3, and you're going to play this in groups of teams. When it's your team's turn, what you're going to do is you are going to choose one person to be the child and one person to be the grandfather. So what's going to happen is the child is going to draw a couple cards off the top of the deck, and then the grandfather is simply just going to hold out their hand. They're just going to hold it out like this, just kind of keeping it still in front of everybody, and then the person who is the child is going to look at the cards they drew. They're going to try to figure out how they want to act out these cards for the grandfather. So we've got this one of the constellations here. So again, you cannot say anything. This is a completely silent game. But maybe, I just can't do this with all my hands here. We're going to pretend this bag is actually a hand, okay? Just so you can kind of see a little bit what's going on. In order to kind of act out this constellation picture, what I might do is I might put, some of these things on the palm of their hand, kind of looking like stars, right? And then we've got this string here. Maybe what I do is I kind of connect those things, right? And kind of try to make it obvious through feeling that these are being connected, so the grandfather can kind of feels these dots and feels them being connected. So that way when they open their eyes later on and they're looking at all the different memories, they might try to connect that with something like that. So that's one way to act something out. Also, we've got a chainsaw here. His chicken running wild. So maybe we try to find something rough, like we have these little Velcro pieces here. Maybe we try to just peel off at the rough side of this. Maybe we kind of rake this across the palm of their hand, so they get kind of that chainsaw feeling. And maybe we have a little piece going, running away from that on their hand as well. You can try to act this out, mime it out, however you want to do it, however you think that your partner will be able to guess whatever it is that you're doing. All right, so in order to make things more complicated, the opposing teams were actually watching that whole thing go down. They saw what you did. They don't know what your cards are per se, but they saw what you did. They, at the beginning of the game, also received a 6-card hand that they're going to look at. They're going to kind of gaze at it. They're going to try to figure out what cards might also be able to be guessed based off of the mime that you did. So they might add in some extra cards that kind of had some, in some way had some things connected like that, or who knows what. And then each team is going to add in 2 cards into this pile. So we've got the original 2. Each team is going to add in 2 more. And if there's not enough teams, you're going to keep on adding from the deck as well, just random cards. So that way there's a total of 8 cards altogether that the grandfather's going to look at. You're going to shuffle all those up, all 8 of the cards, and then you're going to reveal them. So now you've got some random cards from the deck, possibly. You've got cards that your opponents are trying to use as kind of red herrings, and you've got the actual memories that the child was trying to act out. At that point, the grandfather needs to choose what they think the child was trying to act out. And for everyone to get correct, they're going to get a point. Now this game can be very, very challenging. But if for some reason you and your group gets very, very good at it, what you can do is you can introduce the expert mode. This introduces these constraint cards. So basically, these do things like, you have to use the string in some way on this mime. Or, then your hand has to be at a 90-degree angle. There's all different constraints. Maybe you can only use those items, or you have to make sure you use certain items. Or, whatever the case is, there's all different things. The colors come into play here. I can only use orange items, or whatever the situation is. All those expert cards are really, really, really challenging, but also can be a lot of fun. The game is going to end once everyone has had the chance to be the grandfather at least once, and it should be around 2 turns per team. At that point, you're going to count up all of your points you've been awarded, and whatever team has the most points wins the game.
This was so incredibly unique. Just so unique. I cannot stress that enough. There is just like, you really have to think outside of the box when you're doing this. So in one of the games that we had, the picture I had was like of a pond, and there's a frog on the cover, so I was trying to get the person to guess frog, and so I have this little thing and I'm hopping it back and forth, right? And I'm thinking, it's hopping. And then afterwards, we were playing with my brother, who was watching me do this because he wasn't on my team. And he's like, you realize that they can't see how high you're hopping. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. They can't see. They can only feel, what you're doing. So even though you think you see what you're doing and it makes so much sense to you, it's not going to necessarily make sense to what is being felt right there. So you just have to really think outside of the box of what are they going to feel versus what you're seeing, because those are not going to be the same thing.
This is a very, very challenging game. So few games use the sense of feel, right? Everything uses sight or sound sometimes, but I've never really experienced a game that had feel be one of the primary mechanism, which was unbelievable. It was already challenging, but on top of that, if you want to make it even more challenging, there are these constraint cards that you can play with that tell you, you can only play on certain parts of the hand or only on the back of your hand or whatever, or you can only use these certain components, or you know what, you have to make sure in some way you involve this component, or whatever the case is. That makes it even more challenging, and it's a complete hoot, but you're never going to get it.
So when your opponents are playing, right, or when you're playing, they're watching what you're doing, but they don't know what card you're having, and you don't know what card they're having. But what you can do, like Ryan already talked about when he was doing the how-to, while they're doing that, you can look at the cards that you have, and you're like, oh my gosh, they did this thing, which is they're going to guess this card. And so you can pull it out and you're going to throw it in there. So it's really fun because you have no idea what their card actually says. You're just trying to guess based on what you say. And if you don't have enough players, the deck also randomizes that. And sometimes it really screws you over. Like, you have this perfect thing, it's going to be perfect, and then you flip it over and you're like, no, they're going to guess that instead of what I was trying to do. So it's just so unique about how your person is interpreting that and how your opponents are also interpreting what you're doing.
This game is extremely intimate, right? There's very few games where you're touching another person. Not only are you touching them, but you're also touching them while their eyes are closed. You're telling a story by all through touch, and it's just so strange feeling, right? Yeah. We are taught to not touch other people, not to touch strangers, So for that reason, this game had a strange experience sometimes.
Yeah.
When the two of us were playing, the two-player cooperative version, it was totally fine.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
But then we played it with some friends of ours who are more like Euro-style gamers, and they were like, that's interesting. It's weird. Yeah. I don't necessarily want to be that intimate with someone. And like, I could not see myself taking this to like a meetup, within our city, going to a meetup game night, because now you're talking about, hey, stranger, I'm going to close your eyes, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch your hand a whole bunch.
You're actually not allowed to touch their hand. It's part of the game. Your hand cannot touch their hand.
But you're causing their hand to be touched. Yeah. With all this weird stuff. And they're going to be like, I don't know about that, So just for that reason, it was a very peculiar experience. It's very intimate, and not something that you necessarily want to charge into with a stranger.
Okay, but speaking of the intimate thing, here is what is wrong, everybody. Here is what is wrong. So when we were playing this game, one of the people we played with was my brother, right? And him and Ryan were on a team, and it's just so stupid. It just doesn't make any sense, because they'll do something that, I'm watching it, doesn't make any sense, and then when they look at the cards, they're like, oh, you were doing this random thing up in the corner of this one card. And I'm like, what the fudge? How in the world did you even do that? You guys cannot be on teams anymore. It's just not, you can't be on teams code names. You can't be on teams when we play euchre. You can't be on teams when we do this. It's not fair. They've known each other longer than we've known each other, and they just like have this gaming brain meld. It's not fair. It's
we ended up tying. What are you talking about?
That's just because I'm really good.
You are amazing at telling the story. Sometimes it's very easy to make a literal example on your hand. You know, like if there's a snowman, okay, well maybe I'll do 3 rings on your hand. But instead, that's what how my brain works sometimes.
Yeah.
Your brain is much better about telling the story, what's happening leading up to this picture, or whatever the case is. And so for that reason, it tells the story, makes it hard to see that. That's why it's so interesting to see how everybody's brains works in this while playing this game.
So before we started the game and we were just looking at the concept, we thought to ourselves, oh, I wonder if this is going to be like, what was that game?
Dixit?
Dixit, if it was going to be like Dixit with the artwork and stuff. And while it could be, what I think is absolutely incredible about this game, specifically with the artwork, is that it does actually tell a full story. So after our first game, we just were going through looking at the art, and we found that there's different characters in it, and they're all wearing like similar things regardless of how old they are. So the main character, the grandpa, when he's like a young man, and when he's middle-aged man, and when he's an older man, he's all wearing these blue striped shirts. There's even one of the cards where you see his closet, and his closet is just filled with these blue and white striped shirts. So there's all these different characters. There's these stories that are happening. It's almost like they sat down and they actually wrote this guy's story of what was happening in his life from when he was a child to where he is right now as a grandpa. And then they created the art to go with the story that they already created. It was absolutely incredible after we played it, and we realized that there's a whole life here. And it's just really interesting to see how those little parts connect, and how when you play this game, you can totally see the different characters that appear throughout his life, his mom, his wife, his daughter, his granddaughter, just seeing those arcs and everything. I was blown away by that, because it's not just this random stuff. I mean, there are random stuff that's in there, like a poster or something like that, or a picture, or just a scene or something, but it all makes sense to his life. I was absolutely just blown away with that.
Yeah, this game is unbelievably innovative. It is kind of outside the realm of other games we've played. Other games all kind of share certain mechanisms or whatever, and you can kind of see DNA of all of them. This was just outside of all of them. It just was unlike
its own thing.
Unlike any other game I've ever played.
Yes.
And yes, it has some kind of those party game elements, but the dexterity, touching and feeling aspect of this game was so incredibly unique. It leaves an impression on you.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, not only the story of the grandpa, and it's kind of emotional in that way, but the touching the feeling and trying to recreate that story in your head of what's happening as your eyes are closed, it leaves an impression on you. One of our friends we played this game with later on in the evening when we were hanging out, not playing games anymore, he brought back this, I've been thinking about that game in the palm of your hand, I've been thinking about it and how else I could use that, and how I could play it with my family, and how, leave an impression on them too, which is just a great sign. It means you've got
you're
something special
thinking about
here.
the game after the game, right? And not because you want to complain about it,
right?
But when you're thinking about it afterwards, and you're thinking about how you can take the mechanisms of the game and do something else with that, or just play with these certain people, I mean, that is obviously a sign of something that's innovative if it's going to be sticking with you like that. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe so you can see our videos as they come out. Until then, you can find us in all of these places.
You guys, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.